Captain Lee Minho rubbed his tired eyes as he watched the alien transmission for what felt like the 100th time today. The blue creature on the screen looked almost human in some ways, but its skin was see-through like jellyfish, and strange. Lights flickered under its surface. Those lights were getting brighter and more frantic with each word it spoke. Our star dies. Our oceans boil. We seek only survival for our children. The creature's voice was calm, but Minho could hear the fear. Underneath, he had kids back on Earth too. He knew that kind of desperate love that would do anything to keep them safe. Park Jisoo, his communications officer, looked up from her station with a frown. Her fingers had been dancing across the controls all morning, tracking responses from across the galaxy. "Captain, I've been monitoring everything. 17 major civilizations have responded to the Viridian's call for help." She paused, her face getting darker. Every single one said no. Minho leaned back in his chair, feeling sick to his stomach. What kind of excuses are they giving? Jisoo pulled up the responses on the main screen. The Altarian Empire was the worst. They basically said the Viridians aren't worth saving because they don't have anything valuable to trade. Something about resource allocation insufficient for non-strategic species integration, cold as space ice. The captain watched as more rejection messages scrolled by. The Zephyrian coalition claimed they couldn't help because Viridians were too different from them genetically. Even the Crystalline Collective, who everyone knew as the nice guys of the galaxy, had sent a polite but firm no. 17 different alien races, Minho said quietly, watching the Viridian's desperate face. On the screen, 17 chances for someone to step up and do the right thing, and they all walked away. Down on Earth, the news was spreading like wildfire. President Kim Tae-hyung had called emergency meetings that were running around the clock. Every news channel was playing the Viridian's message over and over. People were getting angry, really angry, at how the galaxy was treating these desperate refugees. Minho had seen the social media feeds that morning. Comments were pouring in from every human colony. People were calling the other alien races heartless. Some were demanding that Earth do something, anything to help. Others were posting pictures of their own kids, saying they couldn't imagine watching them face certain death while neighbors just turned away. The captain understood their anger. He'd been in space long enough to know that the galaxy could be a harsh place, but this felt different. This wasn't about politics or territory or trade deals. This was about an entire species facing extinction, and supposedly civilized races just shrugging their shoulders. Lieutenant Kim Nam-joon, the station's cultural analyst, had been quiet all morning. Finally, he spoke up. "Sir, I've been studying Viridian society for the past few hours. They're not warriors or conquerors. They're basically underwater farmers and artists. Their whole culture is built around taking care of their environment and each other. They've never hurt anyone." "Makes it even worse," Jisoo muttered. "If they were some kind of threat, maybe I could understand the rejections, but they're just families trying to survive." The main console suddenly chimed with an incoming priority message. The Earth Command seal appeared on screen and everyone on the bridge went quiet. These kinds of messages usually meant either very good news or very bad news. Minho opened the transmission. The message was short, but it hit him like a punch to the chest in the best possible way. "Prepare for humanitarian response. Humanity will not turn away." The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Jisoo let out a whoop of joy. "We're really doing it? We're going to help them?" "Looks like it," Minho said, feeling a smile spread across his face for the first time all day. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command. We've got work to do." As news of humanity's decision spread across the galaxy, other species watched in confusion. The humans were the newest kids on the galactic block. They had the smallest fleet, the weakest economy, and the least experience with alien contact. Saving millions of aquatic refugees from a dying star system would be like trying to empty an ocean with a teacup. But Minho knew something that the older, supposedly wiser civilizations had forgotten. Sometimes being human meant doing the impossible, simply because it was right. The United Earth Assembly Hall had never been this packed. Representatives from Mars colonies sat next to delegates from the Jupiter mining stations. Even the folks from the Outer Rim settlements had made the long journey to Earth for this vote. Everyone knew they were about to make a decision that would change humanity's future forever. The numbers on the big screen were scary, really scary. Housing millions of aquatic aliens would cost more money than most human colonies made in a decade. The economists had run their calculations 3 times, and each time the results were the same. Taking in the Viridians would bankrupt half the human worlds and leave everyone struggling for generations. Admiral Song Yuna walked to the center podium, her military uniform crisp, but her face showing the exhaustion of sleepless nights. She'd been fielding angry calls from alien ambassadors all week. The room went quiet as she began to speak. Yesterday, the Altarian ambassador told me that humans are naive children playing in a grown-up galaxy, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive hall. He said we don't understand how the real world works. Maybe he's right, maybe we are naive. She paused, looking around the room at faces from 100 different worlds. But you know what? I'd rather be naive than have a heart made of stone. The crowd stirred. Some delegates nodded, others looked worried. Representative Park Ji-hyo from New Seoul stood up. Admiral, with respect, being good people won't pay for food or housing. The economic impact studies show we're looking at resource shortages across all colonies. Are we really going to bankrupt our own species to help strangers? Dr. Choi Sun-ho, the galaxy's leading expert on alien biology, moved to the front. His team had been working non-stop since the Viridian message arrived. I won't lie to you, this is the most complex rescue operation anyone has ever attempted. We need to convert more than half our transport ships into floating hospitals and homes. We'll have to rebuild entire coastal cities to accommodate aquatic life. He pulled up holographic displays showing the massive construction projects they'd need. Underwater cities, floating platforms, specialized life support systems that nobody had ever built before. The coastal cities of Earth will need complete overhauls. We're talking about flooding sections of New Tokyo, converting the harbors of Neo Francisco into alien neighborhoods. It's theoretically possible, but honestly, we're making it up as we go along. Engineer Yoon Dae-hyun jumped up from his seat in the gallery, waving a tablet full of calculations. His team from the lunar shipyards had been running numbers all night. We can do it. My people have been working on the designs. We take the big cargo ships and gut them completely. Install aquatic life support. Create temporary housing pods. It'll be cramped, but it'll work. He was getting excited now, talking faster. And here's the brilliant part. We build emergency ocean domes on Luna, Europa, and New Pacifica. Temporary. Cities under giant bubbles filled with water. The Viridians can live there while we construct permanent homes. The debate went on for hours. Colony representatives stood up to voice concerns about food shortages, housing problems, and the strain on medical systems. Others talked about moral obligations and what it meant to be human in a cold galaxy. Finally, President Kim Tae-hyung called for the vote. The room went dead silent. This was it. The moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. The results weren't even close. Colony after colony voted yes. Mars voted yes. The Jupiter stations voted yes. Even the struggling Outer Rim settlements voted to help. When the final tally appeared on the screen, it was overwhelming. Humanity had chosen compassion over calculation. President Kim's speech went out across human space and beyond, broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Today we prove something important. Wisdom isn't about how old your civilization is or how advanced your technology gets. Real wisdom is having the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. The Viridians asked for help, and humanity will not turn our backs on them. Across the galaxy, alien species watched the broadcasts with confusion and disbelief. The humans were the newest species in galactic politics. They had the smallest fleets, the weakest economies, and the least experience with interstellar crisis management. Attempting to rescue millions of aquatic refugees from a dying star system was like trying to catch rain in a paper cup. But something had shifted. While ancient civilizations calculated profit margins and political advantages, the young human species had made their choice based on something simpler and more powerful. They'd chosen to help, Because help was needed. As the assembly hall emptied, representatives hurried back to their ships to begin the impossible task of preparing for the largest humanitarian mission in galactic history. They had months to transform their entire civilization into a rescue operation. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they decided to do the right thing. Captain Park Jimin gripped the controls of his ship as warning alarms screamed around him. The New Hope had been a simple cargo hauler just 6 months ago, designed to carry mining equipment between colonies. Now it was packed with life support systems for aquatic beings, rushing toward a dying world at dangerous speeds. "Captain, we're pushing the engines way too hard," his engineer Nam Seokjin called out over the noise. His face was covered in sweat as he watched the temperature readings climb higher and higher. "Hull temperature is at 90% of what we can handle. If we go any faster, the ship might fall apart." Jimin looked through the front window at the Viridian star, which was growing bigger and angrier by the hour. It had once been a gentle yellow sun like Earth's, but now it was swelling into a red monster that would cook everything in the system. "How much time do we have left?" "Maybe 6 hours before the radiation gets too strong for landing," Seokjin replied, checking his instruments. "After that, anything that gets close to the planet will be fried." Behind them, the largest rescue fleet in galaxy history followed in formation. Over 3,000 human ships of every size and type raced through space. There were military vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even luxury yachts whose rich owners had volunteered for the mission. Some ships were held together with spare parts and prayers, but they all had one thing in common. They were crammed full of humans determined to save as many Viridians as possible. Down on the planet's surface, the scene was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Commander Lee Hoseok stood in what had once been the capital city's main plaza, now half flooded as the oceans began to boil from the intense heat. Viridian families gathered in organized groups, their translucent skin flickering with patterns of light that served as their language. The aliens moved with incredible grace despite their obvious terror. Parents held their children close, while elders helped organize the evacuation lines. Their bioluminescent communication created waves of soft blue and green light that rippled across the crowds like living rainbows. "Children and elderly go first," Hoseok told his translator, Specialist John Jungkook. "Make sure they understand we're not leaving anyone behind. We'll keep coming back until every last Viridian is safe." Jungkook had learned basic Viridian lightspeak during the journey. He flashed the message using a handheld device that could mimic their patterns. The response from the Viridian official was immediate and overwhelming. Colors Jungkook had never seen before danced across the alien's skin. "What are they saying?" Hoseok asked. Jungkook wiped tears from his eyes. "They're saying that in all their history, no species has ever shown such kindness to complete strangers. They can't believe we came all this way to help them." The loading process was careful but frantic. Human crew members worked alongside Viridian volunteers to move families into the specially modified cargo bays. Each ship had been converted with pools of water and aquatic life support systems. It wasn't comfortable, but it would keep the refugees alive during the long journey to human space. Young Viridian children stared in wonder at their human rescuers. Some of the braver ones tried to communicate with the ship crews, their skin flickering with curious patterns. Human soldiers who had seen combat in 3 different wars found themselves getting emotional as they helped load families who reminded them of their own kids back home. As the New Hope lifted off with its first load of refugees, Jimin watched the planet shrink below them. Through the rear cameras, he could see the Viridian homeworld as few would ever see it again. Once it had been covered by pristine blue oceans that sparkled like jewels. Now deadly steam rose from the surface as the expanding star began its final assault. 3 more trips, Jimin said quietly, checking the radiation readings. "We can make 3 more trips before it gets too dangerous to land." Seokjin looked at him with concern. "Captain, that's cutting it really close. The last trip might be pushing our luck." "Then we'll push our luck," Jimin replied firmly. "We didn't come all this way to leave people behind." The rescue operation continued around the clock. Human ships landed, loaded refugees, and blasted off again as fast as possible. Some vessels pushed their engines so hard that they needed emergency repairs between trips. Others suffered hull damage from the increasing radiation, but kept flying anyway. The galaxy watched in amazement as these relatively primitive humans accomplished something that advanced civilizations had declared impossible. Ship after ship carried Viridian families to safety, while their homeworld died behind them. As the final hours approached, only the fastest and most durable ships could still make the dangerous landing. The radiation was becoming lethal, and the planet's surface was beginning to glow with deadly energy, but humanity kept going. Every rescue ship that could still fly made one last desperate run to save whoever was left. It was the greatest rescue operation in galactic history, carried out by a species that most aliens considered too young and inexperienced to matter. The Viridians would never forget what humans did for them in those final hours, building a new future together. 18 months had passed since that incredible rescue mission, and the world looked completely different now. Dr. Han Yujin couldn't believe her eyes as she walked through the floating gardens of New Seoul's water district. Everywhere she looked, something amazing was happening that nobody had ever seen before. The gardens themselves were like something from a dream. Huge kelp forests swayed gently in specially designed pools, their leaves reaching toward artificial suns that provided just the right amount of light. But these weren't just pretty decorations. These underwater farms were producing food at rates that seemed almost impossible. What made it even more incredible was how it all came together. The Viridian bioarchitects, with their deep understanding of ocean life, had joined forces with human engineers who knew how to build massive structures. Neither group could have created something this amazing on their own, but together they had built something that was changing everything. Dr. Han walked over to one of the monitoring stations and checked the latest numbers. Her eyes widened as she read the data. The kelp forests were producing 30% more protein per hectare than humanity's best traditional farms. That wasn't just good news. It was revolutionary news that would help feed millions of people. But the food production was only part of the story. The Viridians had shared their water cleaning techniques with human scientists, and the results were stunning. The Baltic Sea, which had been polluted and dying for decades, was now completely restored. Fish were returning to areas where they hadn't been seen for generations. The water was cleaner than it had been in over a century. When Dr. Han presented her findings to the Integration Council, the room fell silent. Council leader Bei Suzy looked at the quarterly reports spread across her desk, shaking her head in amazement. Food production was up across all human colonies. The process of making dead planets livable was now 40% more efficient. The economic impact had blown past even their most hopeful predictions. "I never imagined we'd see results like this so quickly," Suzy admitted, looking around the room at her fellow council members. "When we first decided to help the Viridians, some people called us crazy. They said we were throwing away our economic future for nothing. The integration process hadn't been easy, though. There had been misunderstandings, cultural conflicts, and plenty of growing pains. Some humans were suspicious of the Viridians, while some Viridians found human customs confusing or even offensive. But both species had shown remarkable ability to adapt and learn from each other. In the cultural centers scattered throughout the colonies, something beautiful was happening every day. Human children sat in circles learning about Viridian philosophy, discovering new ways to think about life and the universe. At the same time, young Viridians studied human art, marveling at paintings, sculptures, and music that expressed emotions in ways they had never experienced before. The exchange of ideas was creating entirely new forms of expression. Artists from both species were collaborating on projects that combined human creativity with Viridian bioluminescent technology, creating living artworks that changed and evolved over time. Captain Kang Haiwon had been put in charge of the Joint Cultural Exchange Program, and she loved her new job. Every day brought fresh surprises as the two species learned from each other. She was watching a group of human and Viridian teenagers work together on a glowing art installation when Suzy approached her. The Altarians sent another trade delegation. "Yesterday," Kang mentioned casually. "That's the third one this month." Suzy's expression darkened slightly. The Altarians were the same species that had refused to help during the crisis, claiming it would be too expensive and risky. Now they were desperately trying to establish trade relationships and learn the secrets of human Viridian success. "Let them wait," Susie replied firmly. They had their chance to do the right thing when it mattered. Word of the human Viridian partnership was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. Other civilizations watched in amazement as the joint colonies became the most prosperous and innovative worlds in known space. Trade routes that had once avoided human space were now fighting for access to these incredible new markets. The technology sharing was producing breakthrough after breakthrough. Viridian bioengineering combined with human manufacturing was creating materials stronger than anything previously known. Medical advances were happening so fast that diseases that had plagued both species for centuries were being cured within months. Space exploration was advancing at incredible speeds too. Viridian knowledge of deep-sea survival was proving invaluable for long-term space missions, while human engineering was helping design ships that could travel farther and faster than ever before. What the other civilizations had dismissed as economic suicide, helping a refugee species instead of exploiting them, had become the foundation of a new golden age. The Human-Viridian Alliance was proving that cooperation and compassion weren't just morally right, they were also incredibly profitable and practical. As Dr. Han finished her evening walk through the floating gardens, she smiled at the sound of laughter echoing across the water. Human and Viridian children were playing together, creating games that neither species had ever imagined alone. This was what the future looked like, not just survival, but thriving together in ways that made everyone stronger. Changing the galaxy forever. 10 years had passed since humanity first opened its doors to the Viridian refugees, and now the entire galaxy was about to witness something that had never happened before. The massive Galactic Council chambers were packed with delegates from hundreds of different civilizations, all buzzing with nervous energy and whispered conversations. At the center of it all stood Earth's ambassador, Imnayon, a woman who had spent years working her way up through the diplomatic ranks. She had watched humanity transform from a small, relatively unknown civilization into one of the most respected voices in galactic politics. Today, she was about to propose something that would change how the entire galaxy treated refugees and species in crisis. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. These were the same representatives who had laughed at humanity's decision to help the Viridians 10 years ago. They had called humans naive, foolish, and economically suicidal. Now they were sitting in chambers, forced to listen as humanity, proposed new galactic laws based on the very compassion they had once mocked. The Universal Refugee Accord, Neon began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, establishes clear protocols for protecting endangered species. No, civilization will face extinction alone while others stand by and calculate profit margins. The words hit like a thunderbolt. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, knowing exactly what she was referring to. The Viridian crisis had exposed how cold and calculating most galactic civilizations had become, prioritizing profit over basic decency. The Altarian delegate looked particularly uncomfortable. His empire, once one of the most powerful in the galaxy, had been steadily declining, while human integrated worlds continued their unprecedented growth. The contrast was impossible to ignore. While Altarian colonies struggled with resource shortages and technological stagnation, human Viridian worlds were thriving beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Earth's proposal has merit, the Altarian finally conceded, his voice strained with obvious reluctance. But implementation costs. He never got to finish his sentence. The representative from the Crystalline Collective, a species known for their mathematical precision and logical thinking, cut him off sharply. Are negligible compared to the benefits, the Crystalline delegate stated firmly. Our analysis of human Viridian integration shows exponential returns on humanitarian investment. This was huge. When the Crystalline Collective, famous for their cold calculations and profit-focused decisions, endorsed humanitarian action as economically sound, It sent shockwaves through the entire chamber. If even they could see the value in helping refugees, what excuse did anyone else have? Behind Nayeon, her aide Shin Ryujin leaned forward and whispered urgently in her ear. Ryujin had been monitoring emergency channels throughout the session, and what she had just heard would test whether the galaxy had truly learned from humanity's example. The Quartzians' distress signal came in an hour ago, Ryujin whispered. Cosmic radiation storm approaching their home system. Nayeon felt her heart skip a beat. Another species in crisis, another chance for the galaxy to prove it had learned something from watching humanity's success. The Quartzians were a peaceful, scientific species known for their beautiful crystal cities and advanced mathematics. If the cosmic radiation storm hit their home system, millions would die. This was the perfect test case for everything they had been discussing. Would the galactic community step up, or would they fall back into their old patterns of calculating costs and benefits while people died? Nayeon turned back to face the assembly, knowing that this moment would define not just the fate of the Quartzians, but the entire future of galactic civilization. The Quartzians need our help, she announced, her voice ringing with authority and urgency. Not tomorrow, not after committee reviews, now. Who stands with Earth? The chamber fell silent. For a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, nobody moved. Nayeon could feel her heart pounding as she waited to see whether the galaxy had truly changed or whether humanity would once again stand alone in doing the right thing. Then, slowly, one hand rose. It belonged to the Crystalline Collective's representative, the same being who had just endorsed humanitarian investment. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Another hand went up, then another, and another. One by one, delegates across the chamber began raising their hands, volunteering their civilizations to help with the rescue mission. The same species that had turned their backs on the Viridians were now competing with each other to volunteer aid for the Quartzians. The transformation was incredible to witness. Civilizations that had once been enemies were working together, pooling resources and expertise. The Altarians offered their fastest ships. The Nexus Federation volunteered their best engineers. Even species that had never spoken to each other before were making contact to coordinate rescue efforts. As the session ended and delegates began pouring out of the chamber to organize the rescue mission, something beautiful was happening. Viridian and human delegates worked side by side, their partnership now serving as the model for galactic cooperation. Their joint expertise in crisis management and refugee integration was being shared freely with anyone who wanted to learn. The youngest civilization in the galaxy had taught the oldest what it truly meant to be civilized. It wasn't about having the biggest military or the most advanced technology. Real civilization meant having the courage to help others, even when it wasn't profitable or convenient. 10 years ago, humanity had made a choice that seemed naive to the rest of the galaxy. They had chosen compassion over profit, cooperation over competition. Now that choice had become the new standard for galactic civilization, and everyone was better off because of it. The rescue of the Quartzians would succeed, just as the rescue of the Viridians had succeeded. But more importantly, the galaxy had finally learned that true strength didn't come from the ability to stand alone, but from the wisdom to lift others up.